Sabalenka lost everything. A $300 million empire gone in 30 days. While the world's most dominant force faced her greatest downfall, a 20-year-old from Manila rose from nowhere. This isn't just a rivalry. This is the moment the crown changed hands. For 3 consecutive years, Aryna Sabalenka wasn't just winning tennis matches, she was building a dynasty. The Ukrainian powerhouse had transcended sport. She'd become a global phenomenon. Every time she stepped onto the court, the narrative was the same: unstoppable, relentless, untouchable. Her wins came with crushing forehands that echoed through stadiums. Her losses were rare, her dominance suffocating. Sabalenka didn't just compete, she dominated. She held the world #1 ranking like a scepter, and nobody dared challenge her throne. The tennis world bowed to her serve, her ferocity, her uncompromising intensity. But it wasn't the trophies alone that defined her reign. It was the endorsements, the sponsorships, the contracts, the wealth. When luxury brands looked at tennis in 2024 and early 2025, they saw one clear choice: Aryna Sabalenka. Gucci wanted her. Emirates wanted her. Nike wanted her. These weren't small deals. These were foundational partnerships with 8-figure commitments. Her image appeared in glossy advertisements across the globe. Her face graced the billboards of the world's most exclusive brands. She was marketed as the epitome of power, elegance, and victory. The numbers told the story. Sponsors poured resources into Sabalenka because she delivered. Every endorsement came with guaranteed exposure. Her matches drew millions. Her social media following swelled. Her influence transcended tennis. She wasn't just an athlete. She was a brand asset worth defending, worth investing in, worth protecting. By early 2025, analysts estimated Sabalenka's annual sponsorship income exceeded $40 to $50 million. Added to prize money, appearance fees, and personal investments, her total wealth trajectory seemed limitless. Financial advisors spoke of her in terms usually reserved for billionaires in the making. She had endorsement clauses that locked in 7-figure bonuses for Grand Slam victories, prize money multipliers, appearance guarantees. The Sabalenka brand felt permanent, invincible, like it could weather any storm. Her teammates and competitors knew the reality. The gap between Sabalenka and everyone else wasn't just skill. It was resources. It was marketing power. It was the sponsorship machine behind her. When you controlled the narrative, when billion-dollar corporations believed in your marketability, you controlled your destiny. No one told her this would end. No one predicted what was coming. The reign of Aryna Sabalenka in 2024 and 2025 wasn't just about tennis dominance. It was about total market supremacy. She'd achieved something rare in women's sports. She'd monetized her excellence at a level that made her not just famous, but financially untouchable. Brands didn't just want her, they needed her. Or so everyone believed. But every empire has a moment of vulnerability. Every dominance has an expiration date. Every throne has an heir waiting in the shadows. Her name was Alex Ayah, and nobody expected her to matter. In the shadow of Sabalenka's dominance, a 20-year-old Philippine tennis player was quietly building something different. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't dominant, she was hungry. And hunger, as it turns out, is far more marketable than dominance ever will be. Eala's breakthrough came at Miami in early 2025. She wasn't seated high, the media wasn't focused on her, the sponsors weren't calling. She was just another young player trying to find her place in a sport saturated with rising stars and established champions. But then something shifted. She beat Iga Swiatek. Then another top 20 player fell to her racket. Then another. The shockwaves rippled through women's tennis like an earthquake. Here was this young talent, this kid from Manila with a humble background, a relatable story, an underdog narrative that sponsors across the globe had been waiting for. The narrative was intoxicating. A girl from a developing nation, climbing the ranks, a symbol of hope, a fresh face, a hungry athlete with everything to prove and nothing to lose. While Sabalenka had been portrayed as the inevitable force, the machine that crushes opposition, Eala was something new. She was the story. She was the journey. Social media erupted. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Suddenly, Alex Ayah content was everywhere. Her matches went viral not because she was the best, but because people were invested in her becoming the best. She represented something different than Sabalenka's cold, calculated dominance. She represented possibility. Then came the sponsorship inquiries. Nike's executives took note, Babolat saw potential, Globe Telecom in the Philippines embraced her as a national treasure. But it wasn't just regional interest. International brands started analyzing her marketability metrics. Her engagement rates soared, her demographic appeal was broader. She transcended tennis. She was becoming a global icon of youth, determination, and underdog perseverance. What Sabalenka represented was dominance. What Eala represented was transcendence. Brands understood this distinction immediately. In the language of modern marketing, Sabalenka was a proven asset with predictable returns. Eala was an exponential growth opportunity. Every match she played, her stock rose. Every interview she gave, her relatability deepened. Every sponsored post performed better than the last because millions of people wanted to believe in her story. The sponsorship world is ruthless. It's not about who's winning the most matches. It's about who's capturing hearts, who's driving engagement, who's creating content that resonates across platforms and demographics. Eala was doing all three simultaneously. By early 2025, Eala's sponsorship offers had tripled. Companies that previously wouldn't have looked twice at a rising 20-year-old prospect were now competing for partnerships. The trend was undeniable. The momentum was shifting. And Sabalenka? She was still winning matches, but the money, the prestige, the partnership opportunities was flowing in a different direction. The rain was beginning to crack. March 2025 changed everything. Gucci issued a statement. Their partnership with Sabalenka was being restructured. The language was corporate, polite, and devastating. What it meant in reality was simple. They wanted fresh blood. They wanted Alex Ayah's image alongside their luxury brand instead of Sabalenka's. Then Emirates followed. The airline giant, which had announced a landmark partnership with Sabalenka months earlier, quietly began exploring mutual termination clauses. Why? Because their marketing data showed something shocking. Younger demographics weren't responding to Sabalenka anymore. They were responding to Eala. It happened in rapid succession, like dominoes arranged for collapse. Nike announced a new global partnership with Alex Ayah, featuring a $15 million endorsement deal that dwarfed anything they'd offered to Sabalenka in years. The announcement wasn't just a contract, it was a statement. It was Nike telling the world, this is the future. This is who we believe in now. Within 72 hours, 3 additional major sponsors signaled their intentions to either terminate or renegotiate their agreements with Sabalenka downward. The financial impact was seismic. What had been a $300 million sponsorship empire was hemorrhaging value in real time. Sabalenka's team watched in horror. Her agents scrambled to save what remained, but the momentum had flipped. Once brands see the tide turning, they move. Loyalty evaporates. Contracts get reconsidered. The narrative shifts permanently. The sports world erupted in debate. Tennis journalists wrote piece thinkings about generational shifts. Commentators discussed whether Sabalenka's dominance on court no longer mattered in the age of social media influence. Was she too old, too cold, too predictable? Had she peaked not just athletically, but commercially? Sabalenka had been here before, at the top, but she'd never been here, watching her position crumble while a 20-year-old took what had taken her years to build. The psychological warfare was real, whether intentional or not. Sponsors were choosing Eala. Brands were betting on youth. The global narrative had shifted from the unstoppable force to the rising star. And in modern sports marketing, being the rising star is infinitely more valuable than being the established champion. Social media was unforgiving. Sabalenka's sponsorship losses became breaking news. Analysts calculated the financial damage, $300 million in potential earnings over the contract lifespans, evaporating in a single month. The headline repeated across every sports platform. Sabalenka had lost everything. But here's what made it worse. She was still winning matches. She was still world number one. She was still dominant on the court. Yet none of it mattered anymore. The money had moved on. The brands had chosen. The crown, in the realm of sponsorships and marketability, had shifted to someone younger, someone hungrier, someone the world wanted to believe in. The silence was deafening. After the initial wave of sponsorship departures, Sabalenka's world grew quieter. Where there had once been constant endorsement opportunities, appearances, partnerships, there was now a void. Her phone rang less. Her agent's emails became increasingly desperate. The machinery that had surrounded her, the privilege of being the world's most marketable tennis player, had simply stopped. The financial implications were staggering. Prize money, while substantial, couldn't replace what she'd lost in sponsorships. A Grand Slam victory might earn $4 to $5 million, but the sponsorships she'd just lost represented annual commitments of tens of millions. The gap was immense. The loss was real. But money was only part of the damage. There was the psychological toll. Sabalenka had built her identity around dominance. She was the force you couldn't stop, the competitor you couldn't break. She was used to winning, on court, in negotiations, in the marketplace. Now she was facing an unfamiliar reality: loss, rejection, irrelevance in the arena that mattered the most to her off the court. The public narrative turned against her with stunning speed. Where she'd once been celebrated as the sport's dominant force, now commentators questioned her marketability. Was she too intense, too aggressive? Did her playing style feel outdated compared to Eala's more fluid, modern approach? Did her personality, her fiery, no-nonsense demeanor, alienate sponsors looking for more relatable icons? The criticism stung because it wasn't about her tennis. It was about her being deemed unmarketable, obsolete, replaced. Sabalenka attempted to fight back. She gave interviews defending her brand, her value, her worth. She spoke about her accomplishments, her Grand Slam victories, her consistency. But the sports marketing machine doesn't respond to logic. It responds to engagement rates, demographic data, viral moments, and narrative momentum. All of those belong to Eala now. Her teammates began texting her. Fellow players expressed sympathy. They understood the brutality of the sponsorship game. Even rivals acknowledged the injustice. Sabalenka was objectively the better tennis player. But objectivity doesn't sell products. Stories do. And right now, the story belonged to someone else. The tennis tour itself felt the shockwave. Sabalenka still competed, still won matches, still performed at the highest level, but the energy around her changed. The investment in her matches, the primetime broadcasting slots, the media focus, all of it shifted partially towards Eala. Sponsors were paying less for Sabalenka appearances. Appearance fees that had once been negotiated as six figures now faced downward pressure. Prize money remained the same. Sponsorships did not. The gap between what Sabalenka earned versus what she could have earned under her previous sponsorship structure grew exponentially. Over the contract lifespans, the difference would exceed $300 million. That wasn't hyperbole. That was mathematics. The cruelty of modern sports was being laid bare. You can be the best player in the world and still lose everything if the market decides you're not the story anymore. But just when it seemed like the story was over, another question emerged. Was this actually about tennis at all, or had the game changed into something Sabalenka could never win again? The tennis world forced itself to confront an uncomfortable truth. Arena Sabalenka had been dethroned. Not on the court, her rankings remained elite, but everywhere else, she'd been replaced. Alex Ayah represented something the modern sports audience craved: authenticity paired with potential. She was hungry in a way champions who'd already won everything could never be. Her story was the ultimate underdog narrative, a girl from the Philippines rising through adversity, capturing the imagination of millions. She wasn't just playing tennis, she was carrying the hopes of entire nations. Meanwhile, Sabalenka was left defending the indefensible, dominance without glory. She could win matches and tournaments, but she couldn't win the narrative war. She couldn't win the hearts of sponsors or the loyalty of brands that had moved on. This raised profound questions about women's tennis and women's sports generally. Was it about athletic excellence anymore, or had the sport become entirely subordinate to personal branding, social media influence, and marketability metrics? Sabalenka's $300 million sponsorship loss suggested the latter. It suggested that in 2025, being the best athlete wasn't enough. You had to be the best story. The philosophical implications rippled through women's sports. What does dominance even mean if the market doesn't value it? What's the point of being world number one if sponsors are investing in rising stars instead? Sabalenka had achieved everything a tennis player could achieve: grand slams, rankings, records. Yet none of it had mattered when the sponsorship market shifted. Some argued this was inevitable. Young players come along, markets refresh, sponsors bet on growth rather than current achievement. It's how capitalism works. It's how sports marketing works. Sabalenka's time at the top of the financial pyramid was always going to be temporary. Others argued it was unfair. Sabalenka had delivered on every promise she made to sponsors. She'd won, she'd dominated, she'd generated engagement and global attention. To be discarded simply because someone younger came along felt like betrayal. It suggested that in women's sports, no matter how good you are, your relevance has an expiration date marked by youth alone. But perhaps the most important question emerged quietly, without fanfare. What would Sabalenka do now? Would she accept her diminished role? Would she attempt to rebrand herself for a new era? Would she continue competing knowing that off-court value, the very engine of modern athlete wealth, had been permanently transferred to someone else? The answers would define what came next. In the immediate aftermath of the sponsorship exodus, Sabalenka remained silent. She played matches, she won tournaments, she collected prize money. But the machinery around her had shifted permanently. The sponsors, the brands, the partnerships, they'd moved on. The era of Sabalenka as the sport's dominant commercial force had ended, not with a dramatic conclusion, but with quiet abandonment. Brands didn't even announce they were leaving anymore. They just left. This was the cruel mathematics of modern sports. You're valuable until someone more valuable comes along. Then you're not. It's that simple. It's that brutal. Was this just a rivalry, or had women's tennis entered an entirely new age? And if so, what happens to the champions of the old order? 3 months after the initial sponsorship collapse, the dust had partially settled. Sabalenka remained the world's best tennis player. Her ranking hadn't dropped significantly. Her Grand Slam prospects remained strong. But something fundamental had shifted in how the sport viewed her, valued her, and more importantly, monetized her. The $300 million loss represented more than financial damage. It represented a complete reordering of women's tennis economics. For years, dominance had been rewarded. You won consistently, you accumulated wealth proportionally. Sabalenka had followed that formula perfectly. She'd beaten everyone, she'd dominated every tournament, she'd delivered every metric sponsors demanded. Yet she lost anyway. This suggested that the rules of women's sports success had fundamentally changed without anyone explicitly announcing it. Youth had become more valuable than track record. Potential had become more marketable than achievement. The story of becoming great now outweighed the reality of being great. Alex Ayah understood this intuitively. She wasn't trying to beat Sabalenka on court, not yet anyway. She was beating her in the marketplace by being exactly what modern sponsors wanted: young, hungry, relatable, with an underdog narrative that transcended tennis. Eala's story had everything: national pride, personal struggle, youth, determination. Sabalenka's story was just dominance, and in 2025, dominance had become insufficient. What happened to Sabalenka would become a cautionary tale in sports history, not about athletic decline, but about commercial obsolescence, about how quickly loyalty evaporates, about how thoroughly a market can shift when a new opportunity emerges. Other athletes watched nervously. If Sabalenka, the reigning world number one, a Grand Slam champion, an objectively dominant force, could lose $300 million in sponsorships in a month, what did that mean for everyone else? It meant that no position was secure, no dominance was permanent. The market didn't reward longevity or consistency, it rewarded narratives, and narratives could shift overnight. The tennis world grappled with uncomfortable truths. Was the sport still about tennis, or had it become entirely about marketing, personality, and narrative momentum? Sabalenka's decline as a commercial entity, despite her continued athletic dominance, suggested the latter. She was still playing exceptional tennis, her matches were still must-watch events, yet sponsors no longer valued her because the story had moved on. This raised the ultimate question. What is the purpose of dominance if the market refuses to reward it? Sabalenka would continue playing, she'd continue winning, she'd collect Grand Slam trophies. Her legacy on court would remain unchallenged, but her commercial legacy had been rewritten in a single month by a 20-year-old from Manila who represented something Sabalenka never could, the beginning of a story rather than the continuation of one. The game had changed. Dominance no longer guaranteed supremacy. It only guaranteed that you'd been left behind by something younger, hungrier, and more marketable. In the end, the real lesson wasn't about tennis at all. It was about how quickly fortune shifts in modern sports, how thoroughly merit can be eclipsed by narrative, how completely the world can move on from someone, regardless of their achievements, if the story demands it. Sabalenka would have to rebuild, not as a tennis player, because she was already elite, but as a personality, a brand, a commercial entity. She'd have to reinvent herself or accept that her era, despite its dominance, had passed. The crown had shifted, the era had ended, and nobody, no matter how unstoppable they seemed, was guaranteed to keep it. This isn't the end of Sabalenka's tennis career, but it might be the end of her era as women's sport's most valuable asset, and in 2025, in the age of social media and sponsorship dominance, that might matter more than any trophy ever could. The story of Sabalenka losing $300 million in sponsorships to Alex Ayah isn't really a story about money. It's a story about how women's sports have fundamentally transformed. It's about narrative trumping achievement. It's about markets moving faster than excellence can keep up. And it's about how quickly the world can decide you're no longer the story worth investing in. Sabalenka will continue to dominate on court. She'll win more Grand Slams, she'll cement her legacy as one of the greatest tennis players of her generation. But her commercial empire she built, the $300 million in sponsorships, the brand partnerships, the endorsement machinery, that's gone, and it's unlikely to return. Because in modern sports, being the best at tennis is no longer enough. You have to be the best story. And right now, that story belongs to Alex Ayah. What happens next? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, Sabalenka's dominance will never guarantee commercial supremacy again.